Hello, welcome back. This is Jennifer. So glad you're here. So the past few weeks have had quite a few hiccups in the road for me, just some little challenges popping up here and there. So I decided to take care of myself a bit by doing lots of crafting, making lots of cards, lots and lots of cards to send out to people. Really is what I enjoy most about this hobby that I have, and really is what gives me, the greatest escape and the greatest happiness. And when I sat down to start creating, I actually made so much that I have enough content for 3 videos. The first 2 will focus on how I go about doing a lot of die cutting for many cards. A lot of people had asked for tips on this. So this is part 1, where I'll focus on some pretty basic kind of mass producing of a die cut card. Lots of ideas here. Part 2, which will come out soon in a couple days, that one is more about intricate die cuts and how I store all of my extras. And then part 3 will be in a few weeks, and that's on a completely different topic. But I'll give you peeks at those cards later in this video. But today is all about making lots of cards and how to really make the best use of your time when you're doing a lot of die cutting. And I do know not everyone likes to make a lot of die cut cards. I enjoy the process, but everybody is different. If you're not into doing a ton of die cutting at once, don't worry. I'll have other tips and things along the way that I think might be helpful to you regardless. So let's get started with these much loved cards. I have a few variations to share, and I'll show you how I went about making a ton of these at once. I will be using these for teacher appreciation cards, also for thank yous for my son's fundraiser, and I'll keep a bunch on hand for future needs. I just thought the sentiment was fabulous and so many techniques you can do with these dies and stencils. Now this is the much loved stencil set and background die. I love that the background die doesn't cut an outside edge, so you could put it at the center of whatever size card you want. And the stencils work with or without the die. I also grabbed 8 different colors of Concord and 9th cardstock, and I cut it in half in both directions, so I end up with 4 4¼ by 5½ inch pieces of each color. So we're going to make a lot of cards here, and I'll even have some leftovers. Now I'm placing one of those pieces onto my Altenew sticky matte grid. This will hold my cardstock and my stencil in place as I apply ink over the stencil. There are 3 stencils in this much loved set, but today I'm only using this one. You will see me use all of them in that 3rd video that'll come out in a couple weeks. All I wanted to do here was use this inside line, this thin, much loved stencil with a darker color ink to match the cardstock below. So we're just going for a tone-on-tone look, and you can see how fast it is to do this on each of the panels. So I have 32 of these panels, right? That's 8 different colors, 4 of each. And so I've got a bunch to do. But this doesn't take long because it's only one stencil and I'm not taking much effort to blend evenly. You'll see I'm putting down the color very quickly. I really feel like with stenciling, you don't need to spend a lot of time blending. It will even out and look beautiful no matter how you apply the ink. Especially here where we're just going for a tone-on-tone look. It's subtle. You could even skip this if you wanted to. But I will say you get into rhythm and it goes by pretty quickly. Very therapeutic to do this much inking. Now we can use the die to cut these letters out. Remember, there'll be a negative space that'll be pink in this case. I'll save that for a future card. I'm just using the letters today. But I need to run this through my die cut machine 32 times, right, for all the different colored inked panels. Instead of running this die through all of those times by itself, I will run it through with other dies. That's how I get a lot of die cutting done. That's one of my tips. I'll have lots of them. So here is that trick. Let me show you. I use the Griffin Empress die cut machine, but you could do this with any electric machine or manual machine. I really love the Empress die cut machine. One of the reasons I like this electric machine is the different size plates available. On the left, you have the original size plates, enough to do a lot of die cutting. That's a piece of 4¼ by 5½ inch cardstock for size reference. On the right are these mini long plates. I don't use those often, but I do use this size, the mini plates. You can do small die cutting on there and feed it quickly through the machine in either direction. And then finally, the big mama plates, the extra large ones. These are great for getting a lot of die cutting done at once. You can fit a lot on there, so you cut a lot in one pass. Now I'm going to demonstrate different plate sizes and share different tips throughout this video and the next one. So I'm sure some of these tips will work with whatever machine you have, whether electric or manual. It's all about just making the most of your die cutting and really making the best use of your time. So let me demonstrate one thing that you can do that's really helpful if you're doing mass producing of die cuts. So here I have one of my inked pieces. I'm lining up this die and I'm putting it between the cutting plates, and I'll run that through my machine. Then I have an extra set of plates, which I always recommend having. Always have an extra set of plates handy, so in case you have problems with yours or if you want to do faster die cutting like I'm doing. So in this extra set of plates, I have a different background die. This one is the Playful pieces from Concord and 9th, and I'm just cutting that from different green and blue cardstock pieces. So while I set this one up, the other plates are going through the machine. Now I'll feed this one through the machine, grab those other plates that are now cut, and pop these pieces out and get it ready for the next pass through. This saves me a little bit of time, but it also helps me to make more pieces to make more cards. So you can see this works great with background dies. We have 2 background dies here. We'll just pass one through and then pass the other through and just keep going in this little cycle. This works with any electric machine. If you have a manual machine, I'll have other tips later on, but this particular technique is really for your electric machine. So this tip is to have an extra set of plates for your electric machine so that you can feed one through while you get the next ready. Before I share another method for doing a lot of die cutting at once, let me share a tip for how to keep all those little die cuts organized. Even if you're just making one card, if you cut a bunch of pieces, you want to put them in something so you don't lose them on your desk, which I tend to do all the time. But these little trays are especially helpful if you're doing a lot of die cutting. So I have found different trays that work for different things. I'm going to show you some different options today, so maybe you could think if any of them would work for you. For this Much Love, I use these little clear trays. The set comes with different sizes, and I use these a lot. If you've watched my videos, you've seen them many times. Here I have a tray for each letter of Much Love, so I can keep those separated, and it'll save me time later on. So when I pop the die cuts out of the die, I just put them in these little containers. These little containers were up off screen for all the die cutting that you just saw me do. I pulled them into the screen so you could see them. So these little trays are great. There are different size trays like this. You may have something on hand. One of the reasons I like these is you can stack them when you're not using them and put them away easily. Now, if you're not doing mass producing of die cutting, they still can be handy to keep everything tidy on your desk. For the Playful Pieces one, I used one of the bigger trays and just mixed all the colors together since I plan on mixing them up on cards in different ways anyways. By the way, all these colorful Much Love backgrounds, I'm actually not even using those today, but I'll save them for future cards. Next, I need to cut a bunch of white cardstock from these 2 background dies. The white will serve as that negative space and also for stacking up behind the colorful letters for added dimension. You can see how those letters are popped up. Now, I will show you an inlay version later and talk about other things you can do if you don't want to stack up those letters, but I love this look. So we're going to do a bunch of die cutting from white cardstock. Now I am using inexpensive white cardstock. It's called Accent. It's very heavyweight and it's great when you're doing a lot of die cutting because it doesn't cost a lot. I will link to that source below, but you can use whatever you have. Scraps are great too. Now, while I do this die cutting, I'm going to show you another method that you can do to make the best use of your die cutting time. And with this, it works with an electric or manual machine. The idea here is to fill your die cutting plates up with as much die cutting as you can. This is something that I do every time I film a video. Oftentimes it's off screen. If I need to cut a die cut background, I will also throw on some sentiments like this friend one here and cut it from white cardstock and black cardstock. So sitting on my desk, I have some of my favorite word dies. and white and black cardstock cut to small pieces. Most are scraps that I've collected. That way, when I go to do die cutting anytime, I just die cut those at the same time. And before you know it, you'll have a nice collection of word dies that you can add to other cards. So I like to do white and black cardstock because I usually have a shadow die and a word die like this friend. And that way I can stack them up and then do the black on top. Or you can add a colored die cut later when you're making a particular card. Now, your cutting plates may not be this big. That's fine. You can still use like a background die and sentiments and fit it all on a plate. You could do other shapes too. Oftentimes I'll cut hearts, so I have some of those ready as accents. If you're brave, you can combine this method with the one I showed you earlier where you have 2 sets of plates that you're prepping and feeding through at once. But usually I will stick with one or the other method. It can get a little too complicated if you add too much. So I will share in part 2 video that's coming soon how I store all these die cuts and keep everything organized for future cards. It really has been helpful to me. And oftentimes when I'm making a card, I kind of run out of energy by the time it comes to adding a sentiment, or maybe run out of time. So to have some ready, lots of options, really has been helpful to me, and it may be helpful to you too. And I'm going to say it again. I know these ideas are not for everyone. Not everyone likes to die cut. I am just sharing it because A, so many people have asked how I do a lot of die cutting, and B, it's been helpful to me, and maybe a thing or two here will be helpful to you too. Here I'm changing gears a bit. I'm using smaller plates, and I'm just cutting a background die with a glitter cardstock heart. I'm actually going to use all of those hearts on today's card, but I'll do this a lot just to have a bunch of those fun little heart accents on hand. So here I am combining the 2 methods. I have 2 sets of plates to feed through, and I'm putting more than one thing on the plate as I die cut. Another question a lot of people ask is, why do I make so many cards at once? What do I do with them all? I most enjoy giving cards to people who don't expect it. So I will give them to teachers, even teachers I don't know. Maybe I've heard good things and I'll just sign it as, like a school neighbor or something. I will leave them on the window of cars at the grocery store. Again, just signed as a neighbor, encouraging someone. I give them to doctors. I send them to people who leave comments on my blogs and such. I just love sending that unexpected card. So I do send out quite a few. And for me, it's a great joy because I have the therapy of creating the cards and also the therapy of the kindness of giving them. So that's just why I like to go about making lots of die cut cards at once. You'll notice as I'm doing this, I'm putting all those die cuts into the containers up there at the top of the screen. And I'm going to share with you another container. I have one of these sitting on my desk all the time when I craft now. And this is where I throw like the dies when I'm done using them and the stamps when I'm done using them, so I don't lose them on my desk. And I have everything right there on hand and I can clean up later. This is actually a condiment container. You're supposed to put ice in the bottom and put condiments in each of those little containers. Well, I love this because those little containers pop out. It's got a lid that will close. And I will talk more about this container in my part 2 video. Just wanted to show you briefly. After I've done that white die cutting, I'll move all the white die cuts to be with the colored ones. So each letter has a different little tray. I have some adhesive here. I have some of my glitter hearts. And now I can take this tray, it's just a cookie sheet, I have this all on, and take it with me upstairs. So I can do a bunch of die cutting. This was on a Saturday. My daughter just got back from play date. My son just got back from going to a Reds game. And everybody's hanging out while my husband, God love him, was making dinner. So I sat down and started gluing all these things together. You can actually see I hadn't completed all of my die cutting, but this just shows you how I'll just move all this up to my kitchen table and get some of it done. You'll also notice that I was testing out a new die cut machine there. I'll talk more about that in a future video. So this is how I go about gluing these die cuts together. I, again, really like that stacked look. So I usually will glue 2 or 3 of the white die cuts together and then a colored one on top. Sometimes I'll do colored for each of the layers, but I try not to use up my more expensive colored cardstock for those layers, and I usually do white instead, as you see here. I like to use the Gina Connect liquid adhesive. That little cap that is that little plastic thing there keeps it from getting clogged, and it just really works well. I'll be honest, one of the places I do a lot of gluing together like this is on the treadmill. Now, I don't go fast, I go slow, I put it on an incline, so I'm getting a little bit of exercise, but really it's all about keeping moving. I don't know, you hit menopause, you got to keep moving. So I do this a lot there. So I thought I'd take a picture. Here I have this tray that I put across the arms of my treadmill. I use that for computer work too on it. It's a great thing. You can see I have my letters there so I can do some of the die cutting while on the treadmill. I don't recommend it for anyone, but if you're used to doing things on the treadmill, like computer work, sometimes you can do this too. And here you can see how I'll just put glue on the back of 3 of the die cuts and then stack the 4 together. And I know this seems over the top, but I'm kind of at a point in my life where I'm just trying to make the best use of my time and take care of myself. So doing this is helpful to me. At this point, I have a bunch of the colorful letter die cuts stacked together. Some I left unstacked. And while I was doing this, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to use this background die with some of those faux alcohol ink pattern papers. Now, I talked a lot about these pattern papers in a previous video. I'll link to it up here in the top right and in my description below. These are beautiful. It looks like you did alcohol ink or watercolor, but really it's just printed paper. So I thought I would do some cards with that, and it really makes for a nice clean cut looking card. At this point, my die cutting is done and it's time to assemble cards. So what I did was cut some white cardstock, again, that inexpensive white cardstock. You could use scraps too. I cut it to be slightly smaller than our much loved backgrounds, and I glued it to the back. Now, if you wanted to, you could have glued directly onto a note card. I didn't think of it at the time. Otherwise, I probably would have done that. Then in those open spaces, I will inlay or lay into it these stacked die cuts. So by putting that negative space white die cut down first, I know exactly where to pop each of these letters to get a great placement. Now on some of these cards, I'm not using stacked letters to just save time and get a different look. I am putting just the one layer of colored letters into those openings. That's what I'm doing here. This will give a beautiful inlay look. It looks like those pieces are kind of pressed in there, looks like a puzzle put together, and this creates no bulk, but still gives a really cool look. So I'm making about half and half. Half have the stacked letters, half have this inlay look. So there's a little comparison there. So I will pick up all of this stuff on my tray, take it upstairs to watch a Reds game on a Sunday, and put these together. And believe it or not, now that everything was organized and done, it didn't take long to do this. So here I have a bunch of card panels. Now again, I could have done that gluing together directly on the front of a note card. Didn't think of it at the time, but these are cut to be slightly smaller than a regular note card. So these are a little less than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And here we have the ones using that faux alcohol inked pattern paper. I love the look of this, but keep in mind, if you have any leftover inky backgrounds that maybe you weren't crazy about, instead of throwing those away, do a technique like this, and I guarantee they'll look great. And this much love die I happen to like a lot, but there are a lot of dies like this, background word dies, that would work great for this type of mass producing. And I'll link to a few of those options below if you want to check that out. Now I need to create all the note cards to put these card panels on, and I'm going to share some tips with you here. Here I have some Lawn Fawn Fog cardstock. It's like a super light gray, so I'm using a light gray note card for all of today's cards for these much loved cards. This is how I go about making a bunch of note cards at once. I am using my Altenew scoreboard to score the cardstock in half at 5.5 inches. If you prefer a side folding card, you can do the score line in the other direction at the center. So I score all my pieces, then I go back and I fold all of those pieces. Then I will go and cut all of these pieces that are folded in half at 4¼ inches. By doing the scoring and folding first, it saves you a ton of time. If you cut first, then you're scoring twice the number of times. So I have a ton of white note cards already cut, folded, scored, all of that ready to go. So I have those on hand already. I didn't happen to have many of the fog colored cardstock on hand, so that's why I'm making a bunch now. But a good time-saving tip, next time you aren't feeling very creative, but you want to do something playing with paper, make a bunch of pre-folded note cards like I'm doing here from white cardstock or even a variety of colors of cardstock if you prefer. Again, it's a huge time saver to score first, then cut. All right, so now I can put my cards together. I like to use liquid adhesive, especially when mass producing. Liquid adhesive is less costly than any kind of tapes or tape runner, and you get that little bit of wiggle room time to get things placed just right. After I have all my card panels adhered to my note cards, it's time to add a little sentiment strip across the front. You could skip this, but I thought it would make the card pop. So I did one of my favorite things to do, and I really encourage you to do this too. Dig through your old stamps to find sentiments you haven't used or haven't used in a while. So I'm digging through some older Concord and 9th stamp sets and picking anything that would work well with this much loved sentiment, which really, you could put a huge variety of sentiments here. I need more cards that say kind of general things like love you lots, even thank you, and thinking of you, or you're incredible. So those are the things that I chose. But you could put get well on here. You could put happy birthday. You could even leave a sentiment strip off, have the card blank, and then add the sentiment later when you have a particular occasion that pops up. Or another idea would be to give someone a set of these much-loved note cards as a gift, and then have each of the sentiment strips be a different occasion. So they have a good variety of cards that they will be able to pass on to others. If you're looking for a great teacher gift, a set of note cards is always a big hit, and I think this set would be great for it. Once I have all of my sentiments chosen, I will put them into my Misti stamping tool. An acrylic block would work just fine for this. And I'm just kind of spacing them out, but not taking any effort to make sure they're straight. I am trying to put them on the left-hand side of this white cardstock panel so that I can stamp it once, rotate, and stamp again. Now, I also keep on hand pre-cut cardstock, especially a lot in white and some in black. So these are cut to 4¼ by 5½ inches. So I have those ready to go. So I can do the process you see here many times very quickly. I decided to do some of my sentiment strips white heat embossed on black cardstock, some white heat embossed on gray cardstock, and some black stamped on white cardstock, just for a little bit of variety. Notice I stamped this first layer, rotated my cardstock, and stamped it again. That way I'm making double the amount of sentiment strips. Now, I have done many videos showing different ways to make a bunch of sentiment strips quickly or even easily, and I will link to one of my favorites up here on the top right, and in my description below. I recommend checking it out. This just happens to be the method that I chose today. So after I did the stamping with Versamark ink, here I'm adding the white embossing powder and heat setting it, and then I will continue to make other panels so that I have a ton of sentiments ready to go, more than I need for today's cards. But again, I will put them in a little album that I have of extra sentiment strips so they're ready to go. I will link to that video up here on the top right and in the description below if you want to see about how I store my extra sentiments. Today I chose to stamp the sentiments and then use little sentiment strip dies to cut them out. This is one of my favorite sets. It's from Gina Designs, and I can take these little dies and tape them over each of my different sentiments here. Some of the dies will be longer than my sentiment. That's okay. I'll just trim off the excess later. But there are many in this set, so I'm able to die cut a bunch at once. I also have another little trick for you. If you have stamped several panels the same as I've done here, after you have run one through, leave your dies taped to the cardstock. So notice my dies are still there. Then I'm going to take my next panel, line it up behind it, and the sentiments will line up with the dies. As long as my cardstock is lined up together, I'll run that through. And now I have those black sentiments cut out too. So this is a really big time saver when you're doing a bunch of die cutting the same, and it worked really well here. So that's another tip for you. I'll share another tip for cutting a bunch of small dies at once in my part 2 video coming up. After all of those sentiments are die cut and trimmed, I added some scraps to the back of it just for a little bit of strength and dimension. You'll see those scraps over there. Those are just random pieces I've collected in a little tray. And anytime I need to build up dimension behind a sentiment strip, I have those. They are all different widths. It doesn't matter. They are not as wide as the strips I'm using, so I'm easily able to hide them behind those strips and trim off the excess. So I'll take these trays with me, go watch a little more of the game, get all those glued together, and now it's time to finish off our cards. So I have those glitter hearts. This glitter cardstock, by the way, I love it. It's the diamond from Altenew. Highly recommend it. It die cuts beautifully and it has like a silverish gold tone. That's just perfect. I glued that to the center of my heart on the card, and then the sentiment strip on top. I do put something heavy on that while it dries because I'm gluing on top of glitter. On some of the cards, I skipped the heart. I changed the placement of the sentiment. Really, at this point, you can change things up all you want. After I had all of that glued together, now we have our completed cards. So you can see I have a light gray trim around the colorful panel that we created. I have different sentiments. I have some that are inlay, some that are stacked up. Nice to have the different options, and changing up little things like that can keep this kind of thing interesting and also save time if you're running out of time. Like you can skip the stacking if you're running out of time and just want to get them done. So first I showed you the ones with the faux alcohol ink. Here are the colorful ones. There you can see what it looks like when the letters are inlaid. And then the other ones you can see where the letters are popped up. So I used this Much Love quite a bit here, but keep in mind, this can be done with a lot of different dies. I just enjoy this process so very much, and I'm hoping some of these tips were helpful to you. Another reason I recommend trying mass producing cards, even if you're just making 2 or 3 at a time, you don't need to make this many, is that you get to know your product better. And while you're creating, you come up with other ideas. Like when I was cutting these colorful letters, I thought, ooh, this would be fun with a pattern paper. So I did those faux alcohol ink ones. I also thought of some other ways to use this die. For example, you could instead just die cut the Much Love from white and put the negative space over a pattern paper. You don't need to cut the letters and inlay them. You could just put it behind it if you want to save time. You could also use this Much Love die to do shaker windows. So you could stack up like 3 or 4 of the white negative space to create a little well for some little shaker bits, and then put acetate on top, another negative space die cut on top of that, and then you could have a shaker letter card. Some other things you could do, you could cut the Much Love on the front of a card, and it could be a window. Since this Much Love die doesn't cut the outside edge, this can easily be cut from the front of a card. We also have the stencils that are available to go with the Much Love. I didn't really use those today. I will in that 3rd bonus video in a couple weeks, but you could do that to get another look. And you could just use the words love or the word love alone. So die cut the word love, put those on a card, and then put maybe sending above it, or kind of add a different message to it and just leave the word much off. Again, it's just using your products creatively to get a different look. Before I move on to the Playful Pieces cards I made, here is a peek at the Much Love stenciled cards that I'm doing in that 3rd video. I did not use the die here, just the stencil, but I have some tips for adding a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of texture, and more. So that video will be coming out in a couple weeks. Just a little peek here in case you're considering this Much Love die and wonder about the stencils. Well, I still have those Playful Pieces die cuts that I can create cards with. I only did 4 of them for today's video, but I have all of it prepped so I can make more off screen. Hope to do that this weekend. But let's take a look at the 4 that I've created. Now, for some of them, like this one, I did a stacked die cut look for those pieces, the different fun shapes. This time, instead of using white cardstock for the stacking, I chose to use colored cardstock so that everything on the front of the card would be that bold color. However, I did do a fun trick to add some sparkle to it, and I'll share that here. And I'll also show how I did the stamp sentiment there after my card panels were done. You could really add any sentiment to this, but I'm using the coordinating stamp set that goes with this Playful Pieces die. It has these sentiments that fit on the pieces or next to them, so I thought I'd use it. However, keep in mind you could add like a big word die cut to the center, a small sentiment strip, whatever you wanted. The reason I chose to use this Playful Pieces die is because I like that it's completely different than anything I have. I can use up different color scraps to put in the different spots, and it could be used for a variety of themes. Here I did a bunch of blue cards. I have a few guy friends that I think these would be perfect for, a couple of girlfriends too, and I can add whatever sentiment I want to on it. You could add bling to it to make it kind of a birthday or celebration card, but what I decided to do was add some glitter spray. So notice the popped up shapes there have some glitter to it. And I'm going to show you how I did that in a moment. You could also add some little enamel dots. Concord and 9th has those to match their cardstock. I may add those later on, but for now I'm leaving them off. Now to add that glitter spray onto those die cuts, I created my panel, glued all the pieces in place, and then I used the Playful Pieces background die to cut from a piece of scrap paper. I laid it over my card and then sprayed the card with this silver glitter dust. I love this stuff. It comes in gold too. I take it outside and I spray it outside, and I move that negative die cut piece from card panel to card panel and spray on top. That way only the colorful shapes have that glitter spray to it, and it really adds a lot in real life. There are other things you could do to add some shine, but I thought that worked best. And finally, I'm adding these to some of those pre-cut white top folding note cards that I have, 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So that's a look at what I plan to do with these Playful Pieces background. I will leave the sentiment off some so I can add whatever sentiment I want to later on. By the way, here is a close look at one where I just did the inlay without the stacked die cuts. All right, before we go, I did want to give you a little peek into what I'll be sharing and talking about in the part 2 video. One of the things I'll focus on in that video is how I go about doing a lot of die cutting with small, intricate dies. That can be very tedious, but I have some tips to make it better. For these particular cards here, I will be using the Concord and 9th Weekend Market. This die set is so brilliant. It's got everything included in here, from a little bag to some bread to flowers to a little wine bottle you can assemble, a little tag. There are legs and arms so you can make it look like they're holding something. It's just really cute, and a lot of things you can do with it, little presents and more. So I'll share 3 cards and how these will be my plan to make additional card samples the same, how I go about die cutting all those small pieces and saving pieces for later. I also will finally share my finished cards. If you've watched my videos, you've probably seen me show these backgrounds halfway done, where I didn't have a sentiment or turn them into cards. Well, I finally did that, and I'll talk about how I went about making all of these cards too. And this will include tips for storing all of those extra die cuts and making sure you put them to good use. In the meantime, I do have all the products I used for these part 2 card videos linked in my description below if you're impatient like I am. Okay, so there you have it, how I go about making lots of die cut cards. I know this is not for everyone. It's just something I really enjoy and I get a lot of questions about. So I really am hoping that you picked up 1 or 2 tips along the way that will help you. If you're interested in anything I used or the videos I talked about, they are linked below in the YouTube description. And here I'll link to 2 of my favorite videos that I think might also be helpful to you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon with part 2.